Back in 2017, on two separate occasions, protesters walked onto the 101 freeway in downtown LA during morning rush hour traffic. And they actually stopped traffic. They unfurled a huge 50-foot banner that said, "Trump, Pence must go." And they did this in response to a call that had been put out by refusefascism.org, a national movement that Andy, myself, and others helped co-initiate after Trump came to power. And this was part of mobilizing and challenging people to step forward in mass, sustained, nonviolent political protest, starting with hundreds or thousands, growing to tens of thousands and even millions, staying in the streets day after day until the single unifying demand, Trump, Pence regime must go, had been achieved. So these protesters did this as part of calling forward that kind of protest, and for being on the freeway, they were arrested. They were charged with 43 misdemeanors and faced up to 3 years in jail. As this went forward, it came out that the LAPD Special Anti-Terrorism Division had actually opened up an investigation into the political activities of refusefascism.org organizers here in Los Angeles, and even sent in a police spy, a confidential informant, into their meetings. After 3 years and 2 trials, eventually these charges were dropped. The case was defeated, and this was a real victory for the people and for the fight against fascism. So we're really happy to have here on the RNL show, the Revolution Nothing Less show, 2 members of what's been called the LA9, the defendants in that case, to talk about this whole ordeal and what lessons we should draw from it. They are both members of the Revolution Club and of Refuse Fascism here in Los Angeles. Welcome to the RNL show to Chantelle Hershberger and Michelle Chai.
Hello. Thank you.
Thanks for coming on. So listen, I want you guys to take us back to the fall of 2017. And Michelle, I'd like to start with you to just set the context. What was it that we were facing at the time, and you and others with Refuse Fascism here in this city? Why was this protest planned onto the freeway?
Yeah, so in 2017, it was just the first year of the Trump-Pence regime in power. And we had seen protests in the streets, March for Science, the Women's March, right? The day after Trump was inaugurated, that people took to the streets in a way that we hadn't seen before, right? And Refuse Fascism was right in the middle of all of that, putting the demand, the Trump-Pence regime must go now because it's a fascist regime and it poses a catastrophic danger to humanity and all of the planet. And for that, we were calling for, mass sustained nonviolent protests in the streets with this demand, Trump-Pence must go. And, in September of 2017 was the first time that, few people got on the 101 freeway in downtown Los Angeles holding placards that read November 4th it begins, which was a call put out by Refuse Fascism of November 4th, beginning that kind of protest in the street where we can, fight to bring people out in the streets and stay in the streets day after day, night after night with this demand, putting it forward and actually fighting through to grow the movement, right? And people got on the 101 freeway, people got arrested, and after that, people got on in November of 2017, people held a 60-foot banner that read Trump-Pence regime must go, and did the same thing on the same freeway, stopped traffic for about 30 minutes or so, and stood their ground, and to the point where, the cop that came up and tried to arrest people, threw people to the ground, slashed the banner and tried to stop this, but people stood there, right?
Chantelle, you were one of the people who went onto the freeway. I think it'd be really interesting for myself and I think for our viewers to know what was in your head when you did that.
I was saying this earlier, but it felt like when you're anticipating going on a roller coaster for the first time and you're like going up the hill and you're really nervous and you like can't believe you're doing it. But then as soon as you like stepped foot in front of your first car and realized you're okay and like nothing happens, and then it just like empowered you, and then you had like it, and then all the nervousness went away, and it felt really good to be standing side by side with other people that were taking this stand with me. And because I was the S, the very last one closest to the on-ramp, there was cars that actually were getting by us the whole time, and so people would be throwing water at us, telling us get out of the way, but then there was also like people as they were driving by, clapping, and there was a woman that supported us that actually pulled in front to like be in front of me and was giving me a thumbs up and was saying like she was going to stay there and protect us, you know, because she like was fighting. She believed in what we were doing. You know, you're looking around and Trump's threatening nuclear war. He's calling, you know, immigrants like rapists and drug dealers, and you're like, this is terrible. This is messed up. You know, how can we let this go on? You know, and we have to sound the alarm and tell people to wake up. And this was our way of doing it here in Los Angeles, the busiest freeway at rush hour, you know, calling on people to stop accepting this, stop going along with these horrors, this nightmare. And bringing forward to the call Michelle was talking about that, you know, we need to drive this regime out through mass sustained nonviolent protests.
Chantelle, I want to ask you a little bit about the trial because, okay, you get charged and you're arrested for being on the freeway. And you went into court and you did not make the case that you were not on the freeway. You were on the freeway, you were proud of being on the freeway, and yet you still said we're not guilty. And that's counterintuitive. It's not what most people do. I think that took a lot of daring, and you actually not only made that argument, you won that argument in court. I think it'd be very interesting to learn a little bit about how that happened, how you guys came to that position, how that case actually unfolded in the courtroom a little bit.
It was nerve-wracking to be like, yes, I'm going to testify. I'm going to, put my fate or whatever, my future in like the hands of a jury and all that. And instead of just like taking a deal and knowing exactly like where, you know, this was going to go. And I had the certainty to do it that way because, you know, what we did was right. You know, what we did was needed then, and it's needed now more than ever. And we wasn't thinking about like myself, like what was going to happen to me, like in that moment, like when I stopped on the freeway, like, yeah, maybe a car could have run me over like they did with Heather Heyer, you know? And so you weren't thinking about what's going to happen to you yourself, but what's going to happen, you know, in the grand scheme of things, like the whole world situation. And at that moment with deciding to get on the stand, deciding to go through trial, it was because it was important to see this all the way through. Like we started it on the freeway, you know, but it wasn't going to end it's not going to end until we drive out this regime. It's not going to end until Trump and Pence are out of office. And me fighting it in the courts too was just to say that I'm seeing this through all the way to the end. I'm not backing down because the demand is right. The Trump-Pence regime must go. And it's up to me, it's up to everyone, the millions who hate Trump, the millions who want to see him gone, to actually act on that.
Michelle, do you want to add anything to some of what got fought out in the courtroom, what you might have learned from that whole process?
Yeah, I mean, it was a whole fight. I remember, you know, the prosecution fighting to get like these T-shirts banned, the refuse fascism messages banned from around, you know, outside of the courthouse, you know, where we were putting up, you know, posters and talking to people about these cases, that they were trying to get this material banned, that they wanted to keep out of the courtroom the fact that there was a confidential informant sent into our meetings, the fact that, you know, that this organization and the messaging behind it. And it was really hard to do that because their evidence that they're putting forward is these people on the freeway with a big banner that says Trump Pence regime must go. You know, that's all you kept hearing all the time. And I was actually live streaming their action, and everything I was talking about in that, I was glad they played that video as part of the evidence because the jurors got to hear our argument. This is why people were on the freeway. This was a month after Heather Heyer in Charlottesville was run over by white supremacists that Donald Trump called very fine people. This is why we're in the streets. When Donald Trump is telling people that to run over protesters, to take them out on stretchers, these people are putting something on the line because they recognize the urgency of this. This is what we were fighting to bring into the courtroom, to get the jurors to hear, but not just the jurors, but people all out in society, you know, on the campuses, like having people actually sign statements of support for these people because this was right. And actually this point of like, in the civil rights movement, we saw all these people you know, sitting in lunch counters, sitting in and doing things that were quote unquote illegal, taking beatings, taking arrests, risking their lives for this. And it matters. You know, when you look at that from today and look back, you think, yes, I would have stood with those people, you know? And here we are today, and those jurors that were in that jury box and said, those people are heroes and they do not deserve to be prosecuted, are on the right side. You know, and that prosecutor that kept fighting and making them sound like criminals, treating them like criminals, treating all of us like if what we had done were criminals. And meanwhile, the biggest criminals are occupying the White House, are putting children in concentration camps, are separating families, are threatening the people of the world. This is why it's so important that we did what we did.
Mm-hmm. It's clear that the state really came hard after you guys. 43 misdemeanor charges, 3 years in jail, sending in the anti-terrorism division to investigate, sending in a police informant to spy, putting Chantelle on trial not once, but twice, losing both trials, and yet refiling the charges, going after you again. All of this until very recently when this was dropped. They were clearly trying to send a very heavy message, not only to you guys, but to anybody who dare stand up in this way, that if you step out of bounds, if you disrupt normalcy and in protest of this fascist regime, you're going to do time. You're going to pay. And yet they didn't succeed. So I think there are really, actually, they didn't just not succeed, they were defeated in this attempt. Mm-hmm. And I think there are really important lessons to draw out of this, and I'd like to have both of you speak a little bit to close out this interview on what are the lessons. And Chantelle, I'd like to start with you, particularly the emphasis of fighting a political trial, mm-hmm. and what that meant and what people should learn from this.
Well, it's the same reasons we did the Freeway action. Is it kind of goes in the same direction as how we did the trial. Is just like we weren't confined to like protest as usual. Like throughout the trial, they're like, why didn't you protest like the Women's March? Why didn't you just hang your banner above the freeway? You know, like no, we actually need to make a bold statement. We need to sound the alarm, you know, and call people into the streets that feel the same way we do, saying that there's actually another way to go out this, not just that there's another way, this is the way to drive out this regime. This is what's needed. And so we took that Freeway and we did the same thing in the courts, is that we didn't just, you know, go with, you know, how cases are usually fought. You know, we couldn't say, no, we didn't step on the freeway. We're not guilty, but yes, we stepped on the freeway, you know. We're not guilty, but no, we didn't leave when the police told us to leave. Because this was, you know, this was needed. This was First Amendment protected speech. And so we were fighting, you know, a political battle, honestly, in the courtroom. It was a continuation of what we did on the freeway, not just us as individuals, but like on a societal wide level, you know, modeling the people that you don't have to, it's not so simple, you know, and that it's not going to be easy. You know, we're up against not just the fascist regime, but also, you know, a state that wants to, you know, keep things at the status quo, the order, and, you know, going business as usual, you know, and we challenged that on the freeway. We challenged that in the courtroom. We challenged that when we wouldn't be quiet and we kept wearing our t-shirts in the courtroom no matter what they said. We challenged that when we reached out to the LA Times and they did an investigation uncovering, you know, the LAPD spying. You know, we challenged that in every course, every step of the way. And it ended in not just one mistrial, but a second mistrial because we stuck with it. I testified again. The jury refused to convict. And, you know, it went to the point where, you know, they tried to put us on trial for a third time. But, you know, we didn't back down.
Okay, Michelle, final thoughts on the significance of this case and looking forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we did was right, you know, that demand still stands. Trump-Pence regime out now. And, you know, this has to go, you know, to what we were calling in 2017, where there is mass sustained nonviolent protests in the streets day after day, night after night, you know, and, you know, where where this movement is growing and sustained to the point where this regime is driven out of power, you know? And that's what we in the Revolution Club are taking up, this struggle to drive out the regime as part of making revolution, you know, to get to the point where we can actually emancipate all of humanity, right? We can't get there if there is a fascist regime still in the White House, and this is why we took up this fight and this struggle and had this, you know, important, you know, victory, you know, here with these cases.
Well, I want to thank you both. Look, I think what you guys did and the call put out by refusefascism.org for people from very diverse political perspectives, including the revolutionaries, as well as people who have very different views of the future that they want to see, but don't want a fascist America. What you guys modeled in terms of stepping out of your comfort zone and putting something on the line to stop a regime that imperils humanity is very important. The courage you demonstrated and the lessons you brought into this show, I want to thank you on behalf of myself and the whole RNL team, and also our viewers, I'm sure, appreciate this. So thanks for coming on the Revolution Nothing Less show.
Thank you.
Thank you.